After the first Knack that launched alongside the PS4 back in 2013, I wasn't quite sure why the developers at SIE Japan Studio were so adamant about making a sequel. For a family game, the gameplay was a bit harder than most kids could handle, and the overall experience just didn't make it a fun time for me. Alas, Knack II is finally here, and my thoughts on the game are pretty similar to the last one. Though the game does have some fun and interesting moments, Knack II won't win over the crowd who didn't like the first one. Knack, the ever-growing, ever-dismantling sentient life form made from ancient relics, is back, and this time he's out to stop the sinister High Elves from putting an end to all humans. This action-adventure puzzle platformer is filled with ancient secrets to unlock, dangerous enemies to put down, and lots of cliché storyline to ignore. Knack, his returning friend Lucas, and Lucas's uncle discover the rise of elves causing havoc within the world. These monsters have become dangerously overpowered, and Knack and company want to get behind the mystery of it all. That means traveling the world, gathering clues from different locations, and discovering who's behind this elf invasion. Unsurprisingly, the story is dangerously mediocre and can make the average player take a quick snooze between cutscenes. It's almost as though they purposely made the story uninteresting and unnecessarily complex for the child demographic the game aims for. Most kids won't really understand what the hell's going on. This may sound odd when I say this, but the graphics in-game are actually better than the cutscene graphics. Knack always looks pretty good whether he's in-game or in the cutscenes, but every human character just looks awful. It's almost as though the graphics took a step back to the early PlayStation 3 days. To be fair, nothing really stands out graphically within the game itself. You will get a diverse lineup of locations: city, desert, jungle, ruins, and so forth. But sadly, with all these diverse locations, nothing really stood out. Each location is filled with puzzles, secrets, collectibles, and things to do, but it looks and feels exactly the same as the last place you were just at. As Little Knack, you'll fit into vents, air ducts, and crawl spaces where Big Knack can't fit. The controls for Little Knack felt a little stiff, but worked well enough for the short bursts I needed them for. The worst situations you'll get into with Little Knack are scaling tiny ledges up walls. These ledges are so small that only Little Knack can walk across them, but they're so small that even he has trouble clinging to them from time to time. After the first few falls, I came up with a technique that helped me stop falling, and that was always pushing forward and into the wall as I jumped. This process made Knack look like he's bad at jumping and landing, but hey, at least he lands on the ledge more often. Knack II is basically a game based on converting the character Knack from a small-scale, doll-sized being into a big-scale Goliath at the touch of a button, or in this case R1. Progressing through the game, Knack will find various ways to collect more relics that automatically attach to himself, causing him to grow in size. As you find more relics to collect, Knack gets bigger and bigger until he's a towering beast of destruction. However, don't expect to get into just any stage and rampage through the level as Big Knack. Much like the first game, the levels are scaled accordingly, and each level has a specific number of collectible relics to increase Knack's size. For the first third of the game, Knack will grow, assuming you find enough relics, to a modest height. That's only a little taller than twice the size of Knack's human friends. Later on, however, you can expect him to get much, much larger. As the game progresses, it starts to embrace set pieces and really gives you that feel that Knack truly is a monstrous beast not to be trifled with. He'll eventually be smashing his way through ancient ruins, climbing towers, and throwing monsters around. There are a few downsides to playing as the ever-growing Big Knack, though. Big Knack becomes slower. His hits are more clumsy, and the frame rate begins to slow as the many particles and on-screen enemies make for a challenge to the base PlayStation 4. There is an option to lock the frame rate at 30 frames per second, but it still slowed down for me in some of the bigger battles. As you've probably guessed, as Knack gets bigger, so do some of the enemies. There was never a moment where I felt like the bad guys didn't have the advantage on me, though. It's almost as if they knew what attacks I was going to do before I did them. They'd roll out of the way, reflect my attacks easily, and seem to always have the upper hand when it came to getting the beatdown on my character. Even when you're a monstrously huge Knack, some of the smaller enemies are still difficult to hit, and even the smallest hit from them will bounce Knack back a few steps. Sadly, I never found a level that I truly enjoyed. Each location felt exactly the same as the last, and there was nothing new to gain after the first couple stages of the game. Progressing through the level and having to go from Little Knack to Big Knack was fun, but nothing to write home about. The camera within the game is set and locked, but that didn't make the developers hold back on hidden walls and paths that are hard to see. There are tons of hidden areas within the game, and the semi-set camera makes it stupidly hard to see past what's smack dab in front of the screen. There are times when Knack actually has to pass through a hall or behind a wall to progress, and you have no idea if you're stuck on something or walking through properly until the camera changes to the next space. One of the bigger complaints of the last game was the game's difficulty, and this game is no different. There's a steep difficulty curve, and the game is very unbalanced when it comes to enemies. Within the first hour of the game, you'll run across enemies that can shoot, block, and defend, while you still haven't gotten a hit off yet. As the game progresses, you'll learn many different and new moves that'll make taking enemies down easier, but not all the moves work on all the enemies. I often found myself doing the same 2 moves over and over, a heavy punch and a belly flop on everyone. It worked, and I didn't have to find out each enemy's particular battle variations. There's an easy mode and a very hard mode, but normal felt good for me. Sometimes I found myself in situations where I just couldn't figure the enemies out, and I died a few times before realizing some of their battle tendencies aren't like you'd see in other games. They're a bit too ahead of your own thought process. Knack II is filled with things to learn, to find, and to do. By pressing the touchpad, you'll access the power-up screen. Here you'll find new abilities that help you gain momentum in battle, such as greater strength, faster moves, and so forth. Each ability costs at least 1 point, and to get points you'll need to fill the relic energy gauge by simply busting open chests, killing enemies, or killing defenseless animals and bugs. There are also many other chests that contain parts to help build new abilities that can't be unlocked through the power-up menu. These abilities have to be attached and are often very helpful, but you must collect the adequate amount of parts to gain their abilities. There are also variations of Knack armors, such as the returning Stealth Knack and Iron Knack, that help in various situations throughout the game. The voiceovers within Knack II are surprisingly good, and sometimes the humor made me chuckle. However, the music sounds stock and really didn't have a memorable moment within the entire game. There is also a co-op mode that allows you to bring your friend into the game and enjoy the adventure together though. Overall, Knack II is still mediocre, but it has a few moments that are fun. If you just want a game to pass time, Knack II will be great for that. You won't find anything new or anything that redefines a genre, but I don't think the developers were ever really going for that in the first place.
And that'll be about it for this one. If you guys like what we're doing at GamingBolt, please consider subscribing to our channel, and I'll see you guys on the next video.